right, everyone, hi again. The next awesome speaker that I would love to introduce is Chad Lee, CEO at React Games. And Chad's experience in the entertainment industry spans 2 decades. He has worked on some of the most successful franchisees, including Mortal Kombat 2 and How to Train Your Dragon. And he has also been an executive producer on more than 70 video games. And in his presentation, he will tell us how to reinvent classic IPs for today's gamers. Please welcome Chad Lee.
Maybe it doesn't work. It does work. Okay, good. So, my name's Chad Lee. Today I'm going to be talking about reinventing classic IP for today's modern gamer. And remaking classic IP, either games or anything otherwise, it brings generations together. It allows older gamers to experience the games that they once loved in a new way on a new platform. And I love classic games. I love classic things. My first car was a 1968 Mustang. So I love classic things. A little bit about myself. I fell into the industry by accident. I started back in 1994 as a concept artist for a company called Sculptured Software. Back then, there was no path to gaming. There were no classes to take. There was nothing. And so I answered a little newspaper ad for an artist. And I took in some sketches that I had, and they hired me. Again, it's a little company called Sculptured Software. But I was able to hire on as a conceptual artist and then worked on levels and got to work with some of the best IP during that time. Mortal Kombat 2, Mortal Kombat 3, NBA Jam, if you remember those. WrestleMania, which was big back then. So my career started working with great IP. And then I owned a little animation company and then started React Games in 2008. I started React to remake an old game called Arkon. I don't know if anybody's heard of that one, but it's the best game you'll ever play. So you can Google it and go play it. I'll talk about that here in a minute. But after the success of Arkon, I thought, okay, I'll do this game and then I'll go back into animation. But with the success of Arkon, it kind of gave us a foundation as a company. And we've worked with, as React Games, we've worked with some of the best companies in the world, including Lego, Hasbro, Microsoft, EA, Intel, and DreamWorks. So, some of my favorite classic games, I'll just run through a list really quick. If you have heard of these games or have played them, raise your hands. I want to see. Mine are 2049er. Really? Oh my gosh. This right here is AAA graphics during that time. This game was out in 1982. Epix, Jumpman. A couple guys have played that, one of my favorites. Lode Runner, the original. Okay, we're getting more. Again, AAA graphics. These games retailed at $49 to $59. Can you believe that? Today's AAA games. And then Exodus Ultima 3. Anybody heard of that? You're not a gamer if you haven't heard of this. So you should just go home right now. This the Exodus series, you can see that in its influence in modern games. From Skyrim to Grand Theft Auto to Destiny, it all came down to some of these classic games. And that's why classic games should be remade, so that people can remember where these games came from. And then, of course, my favorite, Arkon. Who has played Arkon? All right, good. This is my favorite. I'll go into a little more what Arkon is, but basically it was the first battle chess game in the world. So what is a classic game? That can be debated quite a bit. For the purposes of this talk and my talk, I consider a classic game released before 2000, and I'll tell you why in a minute. And also, it's significant in some way, like either in sales, or it was innovative, or it was the community loved it, or whatever. Now, I chose 2000 specifically for this talk because 2000 is when the PS2 launched. And so it had like the really good graphics, the 3D play style, and I kind of consider that from the PS2 onward, you kind of play games the same way, right? First-person shooter, over the shoulder, like you look at Destiny and all the modern games, they played the same way pretty much since 2000. Before 2000, excluding kind of the PS1, games had to be really creative in how they showed the graphics to the player because they weren't very powerful. Mostly you had 2D graphics and things like that. So the game creators had to be quite inventive. So with that said, when we're talking about classic IP to make, not only do they come from video games, but they come from a lot of different sources. For example, old TV shows, movies, books, celebrities, we've seen some of those, comics, and just products, things that you would never think, oh, this would make a really fun video game. I'm sure most of you have heard of this game, Turok. Did you know that it came from a comic book? You probably did. Did you know what year the first Turok was released? The comic book, I mean? 1954. It was a single-issue comic that was put out a long, long, long time ago that nobody's ever heard of. It was buried, and then back in the 70s, there was a couple more issues. But nowadays, there's 6 games based off the Turok franchise. I was fortunate to work on part of the very first one that was done by Acclaim, because the company I worked for, Sculptured Software, was bought by Acclaim, and I was able to work on it. And I liked it personally because I'm Native American, and the hero in this is Native American, so it's kind of cool, or American Indian, or whatever you want to call them. Also, a novel, a little red novel from a Polish author started the Witcher franchise. So, you know. And then these 3, anybody have ever played these? Good. Cool Spot is a soft drink from 7-Up. Just who would look at a bottle of pop and say, oh, that would make a great video game? So you can find them just about anywhere. Raisins, and then, of course, Coke's Space Invaders. So why should we remake video games? I touched on this a little bit before, but I want to go a little more into depth. I hear a lot of people thinking, oh man, they're remaking this movie, or they're redoing this video game. Aren't there any more original ideas out there? There are, but the reason why we make video games is, I think the very first one is the nostalgic factor. Now, video games as a medium is the most immersive medium that you can ever experience. You are the character, you're making the decisions for the character, going through all the different environments. Movies, TVs, every other media, you're fairly passive. You're just kind of sitting there watching something. But with video games, you're immersed. And the memories that you have playing your first video games, if you can remember the first video games that you played and the first moments you're like, oh man, this is so cool, those will stay with you forever. And when you get older, like me, and you have kids, lots of kids, you kind of want to share those. And so the nostalgic factor is really big. New platforms. Video games are also the only medium that were created for a specific platform. So when that platform dies, so does the video game. For example, with movies, you make a movie, it's done its run, they stick it on the shelf, and then they can bring it back anytime they want just by putting it in the reel and showing it. With video games, once the platform's done, that's it. You can't play it again unless you use emulators or unless the game is ported. But there's some work that has to be done. Updated visuals. If you look at some of the HD remakes, like the Crash Bandicoot, the one that just came out or is coming out, it looks awesome. I mean, there's some really cool classic games that have really fun gameplay, but the graphics aren't quite there. So updating the visuals is a way to go. They're easier to develop. when you get a classic franchise or an IP, you already know what the game is. So you just have to redo it in a slightly different way. So it's easier to develop. It's not like a white paper that you just have to, man, what is this video game going to be like? And then you have an existing fan base. They can spread the word like wildfire, and I'll show you some examples of that in our game. Let's talk about mobile now for a minute. So mobile, from this graph, you can see that the Samsung S6 technically has 5 times the power of the PS2. That's true. The mobile games or the mobile devices are getting a lot more hardware shoved into them. They're a lot more. They can hold a lot more things. And so why not? Why not make a really cool classic video game experience on mobile? It's right there on your phone or in your pocket, wherever you go, you can have that. And video games back like in the 80s and the early 90s, they were kind of smaller in size, and so you can do bite-sized play sessions. They're easier to design for. So, how to choose an IP? What makes a good IP? When you look at something, I mean, I would like to be in that pitch meeting when those executives say, "We'll make a game about a soda pop." I wonder how that went. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. The way we've done it, or the way that our studio's done it, we have 4 measurements of how to choose an IP and what we take into account. Number 1, the core characters. They have to be good, they have to have depth, and they have to be compelling. Number 2, the conflict or the storyline in that franchise or that IP has to be relevant, it has to be interesting. Number 3, it has to be interesting for the demographic. This is important because if you're making a game for the European market, it perhaps won't do as well for the Chinese market. Or if you're taking a Chinese IP from a really cool game, somehow you're going to have to make that interesting for the Western market because they don't always translate really well. And then passion, and we'll talk about passion here in a little bit. So these are things that we look for as a studio, and when we're either looking for an IP or we get a client that has an old IP and say, hey, can you remake this for us? Then we run down this list. I'm going to use a baseball term. This is another thing that we need to consider. Who here knows baseball? Or who here doesn't know baseball? Okay, so in baseball, this is American baseball, you have a batter here, and this guy throws the ball, and he's supposed to swing a bat, kind of like cricket, and hit it. A home run is when you hit it so far that it goes out of the field of play. That's a home run. And typically, when you're trying to get a home run, you're swinging with everything that you have. So you're either going to hit the home run, or you're going to strike out and miss the ball, and it's just going to go past you, and you're going to get out. A base hit is when the batter just kind of swings and hits it like right here, and they run to first base. And so you don't have to swing as hard. It's a little easier to do that, but you hit enough base hits, and they start scoring. And so in that analogy, when you're looking for an IP, should you get like the best IP from the 90s or the early 2000s and try to live up to the hype that it once had? Or do you choose an IP that perhaps didn't reach its potential during that time, a little less well-known, and then just make it into a really great IP? That's another thing that you have to take an example. A good example of that is the Iron Man franchise. Everybody see Iron Man from Jon Favreau, the movie? Iron Man wasn't a very big hit for Marvel. So when Jon Favreau went to get the license to make the movie, they said, oh yeah, here, you can take it. He made the movie. It did such a good job that now Iron Man is at the top of the Marvel list, and he kind of leads the Avengers now. But before John's movie, it wasn't a very big franchise. So what kind of remake are you trying to make? There's lots of different kinds of remakes. There's a port, there's the remaster, there's the remake, and the sequel. The port simply is just taking it from one platform, throwing it onto another platform. There's like it's almost a brain dead work. You just one to the other. An HD remaster is kind of like the Crash Bandicoot one, where they just keep the core gameplay the same, but they update the visuals and make it look awesome. A remake is something where you just take the franchise and you kind of keep the spirit of it, but you completely overhaul the look and some of the gameplay elements. And then a sequel is something that's completely different. Like you look at some of the Lara Croft or even the Turok ones, the storyline, everything is different from game to game, but it keeps the name. So the last thing to consider, really, one of the last things is modern gamers. What do they want? Back in the 80s and 90s, people played games differently. The games were different, more simple because of technology. So nowadays, what we've come to realize with modern gamers, and this is not like the stand-all list. This is just my observations with modern gamers. Is they want good graphics. I have younger kids. They grew up with the Xbox as like the worst console, and it moved up from there. But when they look at some of the old games that I play, they just kind of look at it and think, that's not even a game. That's nothing. Why are you playing that? Like Arkon. They expect lots of content. Games now you can play for like weeks and weeks at a time, especially with multiplayer. You're in there, and you think of all the hours that League of Legends players put into the game to learn it. Friends, multiplayer is a big thing for modern gamers. They like to play with their friends. Whether it's a multiplayer game or not, they like to share with their friends and say, hey, this is what I've done. And they want an immersive experience. People usually play games because they want to somewhat escape from their reality, and they want to be involved in this world and to create an immersive experience. And 8-bit graphics kind of don't do that, but really good AAA graphics do. So when you take into account modern gamers, you have to, in your design, have a good balance between the two. So when you sit with your designers, you have to keep in mind what the modern gamer wants, but then not change the IP so much that it loses the spirit of the classic game. And so let's talk about how to do it badly. We've seen things done. We've seen, like, when I was looking for Arkon and trying to get the license, there was a series of time where other publishers got the license before I did, and I just was so angry and upset because I thought they're going to ruin it. I got some of their GDDs and was able to look what they were taking it and thought, they're going to totally ruin it. So when you're looking to do a revamp of an IP or a remake, don't do the following things. And these are things that we see, and sometimes they can't be helped. But try to avoid these things. I'm sure there's more on this list, but these are the things through my experience, our experience as a company that we've gone through, that can ruin an IP. One, change the spirit of it. We've seen some games that perhaps was a dungeon game that a company has changed to a city builder. Completely new mechanic. And the reason they do that is because they think, we'll put it on mobile or whatever, and we'll reach a new audience by making it a city builder. Well, they kind of didn't do that, but then they alienate their old audience as well. So changing the spirit is pretty dangerous. Number 2, money grab. And we've seen a lot of people in the news, and the bigger companies get blamed for this all the time, but just a money grab. Let's just spit some games out really fast. And I won't tell you who said it, but I was at a company, one of my earlier companies, and the VP, and they're out of business, so I can say this. This was early 90s. But he said, we can basically make a piece of crap, put it in a box, and as long as it had this title on it, it'll sell. And I just thought, man, that's the worst thing to do. And they did that, and they lost the license, and it went to somebody else, and the company closed down. Big wonder why. Rush for marketing. Now, we've experienced this a lot. We'll have a client come to us and say, hey, we need this game done in 4 months, and we need it, we need it as quickly as you can, and here are all the features. And we end up trying to do it, do a pretty good job, but then it feels rushed. So try not to do that and try and meet with whatever guidelines. We work with some big companies, and a lot of times they have movie or marketing money involved. Maybe a toy is launching, and so that's why they're rushing towards a marketing deadline. And then number 4, and this is especially true for mobile, is a bad control scheme. Can totally ruin it. If you're struggling with the controls, or that the controls take you out of the experience, players just they don't like that at all. So doing it well. Here's a few key things that we as a company do, and I personally look for in everything that we do. Number 1 is passion. You have to be passionate about it. You have to really love what you're trying to do, or the community is really going to notice that and understand that, oh man, it was just a money grab or something. Innovate. So as a rule, React Games, we do what's called an 80-20 with design. So 80% of it is something that the gamer is familiar with. So with an IP, if it's an RPG or something, we generally, if we're revamping something, we keep it fairly similar to that, and then we innovate 20%. And the reason is because we've found out that when you innovate more than 20%, it's really hard for the gamer to get into it. You have to explain a lot of things. You have to have a 10-minute long tutorial about how do the controls work and what the players do and all that stuff. So if we just get them into an experience, they're familiar with it, and then it's just a slightly new way to experience it, it's a win for the player. We design for the platform. So, for example, mobile is going to have a lot of touch inputs instead of like a virtual D-pad or some other funky way. You cannot have a PC or a console experience on mobile. That's just not the way mobile's played. Mobile's played in really small chunks. The average mobile session now is less than 7 minutes. Casual players are less than 3 minutes. Hardcore and midcore players, they'll stay a little longer. It'll be over 7 minutes per play session. But generally, it's quickly get in, quickly play something, and then quickly get out. And then involve the community. If you have an existing fan base for a certain IP, we'll involve the community day one so that they're involved and they can really help evangelize and get the word out. So, Arkon, again, AAA graphics back in 1983. One of the best games ever. It was my favorite game. So I spent some time trying to get the license, and it took me about 8.5 years to get the license. I spent a long time just trying to find the owner of the IP. Arkon was EA's first game that they did ever. And so at that time, back in '83, EA did not grab the license from the IP from the owner. The owner kept the IP, and so he's a name by the name of John Freeman. I had to track him down, and then before I even got the license, the road that I had to travel was I had to create a game for free, basically a demo. So I found this, I stumbled on this engineer in the UK named Lee Bowers. He was kind of doing a labor of love for Arkon. He loved it. And so I said, hey, I'll do all the artwork for you. I'll do all the graphics. And so this was our passion project. I took this to E3, and at E3, and this is how grassroots and kind of, I don't know, naive I was, I guess, but I just got a t-shirt, got one of those iron-on, Arkon is back, and I wore it around E3, and I would just show everybody who would go there, and that was a long time ago. But people got interested. People would say, oh, I remember that game, I remember that, and after E3, I had a publisher that was willing to fund part of it. And so I went back and said, oh, great, we have funding. And the engineer said, I'm not really into doing that. I'm too busy with what I'm doing. And then the next week, I heard that a publisher picked up the license from somebody else. So the the interest that I got, they went and they got it. So over the course of the next 8 years, that license passed through different publishers' hands, and then in 2008, I was able to get it. So that's passion, I guess, keeping with something. Step 2, what we did, as soon as I got the license, I called up a couple of friends and said, hey, we're gonna do this game. Got a small team together, and then we started a blog. Now, back then, there was no Facebook, Twitter, or any of the social networks. So the only thing that we do is blog about it and start a forum. So that's what we did. We started a forum. I went to, again, E3. We had a small booth in PAX, and we just kind of did everything. I called and I emailed every single video game blog and website I could think of. And fortunately, they remembered Arkon, and when we were ready to release, we were on the front page of all the, like, Kotaku and all the big blogs at the time. So then we designed for the platform. Shoot, I'm going to run out of time, but I'll step through these. So what we did was we designed for the platform by creating tenets, and I think this is really important for any game, not just IP that you're recreating, but any game that you do, you should have core principles and stick by them, and they guide every design decision that you make. For Arkon, it was team-based and competitive. It was balanced but not equal. The original game had to be at the core, and for that reason, we kept it 2D sprite-based. We could have made a really cool 3D game using Unity, but we chose to just do a sprite-based one. And we considered the play sessions. We made the gameplay a little shorter so that they could get in and play it. And then the inputs. Some of them were touch-based, but we since it was a Twitch-based game, we had to do that dumb virtual D-pad. I tried to get away from that, but I just couldn't on this one. And so our innovations that we did with Arkon. So Arkon, the way you play it is, it's a chessboard, like you saw, but when the pieces got on the same square, that would open up into a battlefield, and you would actually have to play with that piece against the other piece. That was cool because a pawn piece, only had health that much, and the queen had, that much health. But if you were really good with the pawn, you could beat the queen. And so that was the crowning moment as an Arkon player, is when you can take a goblin, those of you who played it will know this, and you can beat all the other players, or all the other pieces on the other team with a goblin. That was awesome. So what we did, we built upon that core gameplay. We now allowed 4 players to play. We introduced 3 different game modes. One game mode had you level up the characters as you played the game. Another game mode just gave random drops to you. We created a single-player campaign that they can play that told a storyline. We had a writer from a comic book come in and write the background story for us, so we have a pretty robust background story now. We provided each character with a secondary attack. We rebalanced them, and then we kept the classic mode. So those are some of the innovations. You notice that there's nothing like, too crazy about what we did. We just kind of kept it simple. And so by doing that, we purposefully targeted the main core Arkon fan base. We didn't really try to reach out too much to the new fan base, but this game was, it was called Archon Classic because we wanted to keep it classic and kind of get that old Arkon community back playing. So when we released on iOS within 10 days, it was the number 3 strategy game, and it was the number 12 strategy game overall. It was the number 12 game overall. It made the What's Hot list. Even today, it averages, it's got 4 out of 5 stars on the App Store. And from reviewers, it's 4.2 stars. We were on the front page of Steam, Kotaku, Gamersgate, and a bunch of other websites. So people remembered this one. The successes that we did. This is our team. This is our entire team. You can see a bunch of veteran guys there. Some of our 2 engineers. I did the art. He did the design, and we had a helper doing the art. But that was it. So the successes we had, a well-balanced team-based game. We innovated, we introduced those little elements, and some of the things, almost out of time, some of the things that we could have done better. So again, the D-pad, this thing that I hate, that we've promised we'll never do again ever on a mobile game, but sometimes you just have to do that. We could have changed the gameplay slightly differently so that we didn't have to use the D-pad. The second thing is the screen size. I designed the layout, and I was a bit of a moron when I did it. So you can see that this whole area didn't need to be here. If I were to do it again, I'd get rid of that and enlarge that. So there's some screen size issues. And remember, the very first iPhone, the screen size was like that big. It was tiny. The thing we could have done better also is support. So we released the game. We did a couple updates, but that's about it. And then we just kind of left it alone because we got busy on other projects and building the company, getting the company stable, that this kind of was left out in the space. And then we didn't have the expertise at that time to include multiplayer. And so that's another thing that I would change right off. So moving on, again, Arkon was the first game that we did. Since then, we've built and we've done over 60 projects as a company, a lot from mobile, and all of them having to do with some type of IP from others. And then one of our latest games, you'll see, is another game. This was done in 1989, I believe. I don't know if you guys recognize the game at all, but it's an adventure RPG. This is the original, and this is our version. So you can see that we're keeping to the 80-20 rule. We wanted to keep this gameplay the same. A lot of it's a text-based adventure throughout the game, but I have a great art team. They do beautiful graphics. So we went through some of the benefits. I won't go through that again. But some of the pitfalls with working with licenses that I've seen is sometimes the cost of a license is pretty big. And so as an independent studio or somebody who wants to do it, some of them are out of reach. But again, there are other ones that are. Another thing is some of the licensors are just really hard to work with. And I'll just stop there because we worked with enough that they're just hard to work with. So you have to find the right balance. And then fan base. If you don't take care of the fans, they will just slaughter you. And that's not just old IP games. You guys know that's just gaming in general. If you're not there on top of them, giving them updates and things like that, instead of evangelizing how great you are, they'll just tell everybody how crappy you are. I just wanted to end with a quote, and this has guided me. One of my favorite authors is Dostoevsky. He said in his book, Crime and Punishment, "Don't be overwise. Fling yourself straight into life without deliberation. Don't be afraid. The flood will bear you to the bank and set you safe on your feet again." And I've kind of lived my life that way. I see an opportunity, and I'll just jump, and I'll just do it. I mean, I didn't know how to run a company when I started React Games. I just, a license, let's go. I jumped in, and somehow it worked out. Doing games, doing IP, doing things like this, you jump in and you figure it out. And, things just work out. So if you're considering remakes, go do it. The world needs remakes. We need to be reminded of all the cool games that we had when we were young and how awesome they are and how awesome they could be again. So that's my talk. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
So it's Q&A time. Anyone, please welcome.
Hey. I want to ask you about money. So how much money costs an average license of classic game?
It depends. Like, there are some that actually you can get for free. They just want a revenue share. We have actually quite a few companies that have come to us and say, here's our library of games, just pick one and do it. And so if you do a co-production, if you're not asking them for money, sometimes you can get them for virtually nothing. Others cost 5,000, 10,000, something like that.
Yeah, thank you. And one more question about after hitting such a long-term target as doing this Arkon game, how you feel?
How what? How do I feel?
What was your feeling about this, after the release of this
After the
game?
release of Arkon?
Yeah.
Oh man, I tell you, in production, remember that balance chart? We're just balancing. We knew we weren't going to hit modern gamers because it wasn't, whatever. But we were hoping that the Arkon community would like it, and they did. And so after release, I think I slept for a week. I was really happy with it, and we felt so good about it that we just kept the company going, and we just started growing from there, getting more contracts. So, yeah, glad to get it over with.
Thank you very much for your speech. I have one question. You said if you make a remake, you need to involve community to your game. And the question is, what do you think about crowdfunding, Kickstarter for your project?
I think it's very good because back then we didn't have any of that stuff. We didn't have GoFundMe or Kickstarter or whatever. If we were to do it again nowadays, that would be one of the first places we would go, because then you can see what the appetite is for your game. If you can involve the community, your game would be funded right away before you even started. So I think GoFundMe is an excellent option.
I have some pet project. It's open source project, and I have community. I have community for 600,000 players, and it's Tomb Raider game. It's Remake. Remake for WebGL, Android, iOS, and various platforms. And I need to ask, do I need to ask license of Tomb Raider IP for Square Enix, or I just wait, Square Enix spot my project and email me cease and desist process? I don't know.
Right.
What's your recommendation?
Well, since I'm on camera and this is streaming live, then I would have to say you'd probably have to get the license from somebody, from them first. So yeah, I would recommend doing that.
So I need to email Square Enix about my project and ask.
Probably, and send them a demo, send them the link and say, hey, this is what I'm doing.
But another problem. My project is open source and I have many forks, my projects. So if I stop work, I not guarantee somebody
We'll take it. Yeah. I don't know. You could, if it were me, I might approach him as a co-partner or as a partnership and say, hey, I have 600,000 users playing my game. Can we, do something together?
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Anyone? So I guess that's all for today for Reinventing Classic IPs. Let's give him a round of applause. Thanks.
4C with another one of our speakers. Hello, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Leszek Szczepański. I'm a senior gameplay programmer at Guerrilla Games in Amsterdam.
Great. So tell us, let's talk games. What's your favorite video game?
Neverwinter Nights.
That's an awesome choice. What's the very first game you've ever played?
I don't remember. I mean, I had an original Nintendo, so I played like Contra or Mario. But the first game I actually remember playing well was Doom. I was way too young to play it.
That's some time ago. How did you get into the industry?
Actually, I was a little bit lucky. I was studying at the time, and like in between universities, so to speak. And my sister said, "Hey, there's this company doing games. Would you be interested in applying?" I applied, and I got a job in mobile industry. And for 5 years, I did mobile games until I figured I'm done and started doing console games.
Not bad. But if you had the chance to go back to the time and give yourself one advice, what would it be?
Don't worry about school, just make games.
You hear that? That's what I'd wanted. So tell us, what do you like and hate about the modern industry?
Okay, so my perspective might be a little bit weird because a lot of people complain about the crunch, working conditions, so on and so forth. I've been really lucky where I work right now because the working conditions are really, really good. The only thing I can complain about the AAA industry is that even being like in a senior position, you don't have that much control over what you're building. And you have dreams, you have things you want to build, but you're still like part of the process. If you're like in a 200, 300 person team, you would like to make a bigger impact. On the other hand, we are building amazing things. It's wonderful to work like 5 or 7 years on a project, and after seeing all these prototypes, bugs, failed builds, and so on and so forth, see the thing on YouTube or on the disk and actually playing out more than you had imagined, and much more than you could have built on your own.
Well, speaking of building things on your own, imagine you had full creative financial freedom over your own project. What would it be then?
Oh, I'm a horrible nerd, so I would just create like an isometric role-playing game. So something like Fallout or Baldur's Gate. So something like that. I'm not sure about the setting, maybe something futuristic, but like a really hardcore isometric role-playing game. That would be something I would do on my own.
Speaking of futuristic, where do you see the industry going in the future, like in 10 years' time? Maybe some breakthrough technology?
Oh, I'm not really sure. I mean, we've been talking about the end of PC gaming, end of console gaming for years now, and it didn't happen. So I think that there will be small revolutions coming on, like new technologies, new ideas, but we will be still sort of standing on the shoulder of giants. So PlayStation will be there, Xbox will be there, Nintendo will be there, and there will be a lot of stuff, and we will continue growing. Consoles will continue growing, PC will continue growing, mobile will continue growing, and new technologies like VR, AR, or God knows what else will also continue growing. That's what I think, at least.
Is crossplay gonna become a thing, you think?
Sorry?
Is crossplay going to become a thing?
Like between different consoles? Or?
Yes.
I think so. I mean, there's only benefit to that, right? And it already happened before with different games. So I think it will happen, but it's not up to people like me to make it happen.
Well, speaking about tech, we have VR, AR, and lots of amazing stuff. Do you think these new input methods will eventually replace conventional controllers or not?
I definitely don't think they will replace. I think they will be their own thing in their own right. So people were talking about mobile replacing normal games, and that didn't happen. People were talking about mobile replacing even handhelds. And yes, the handheld market is so much smaller, but it's still there. I mean, how many people bought the Switch and walk around with a Switch, right? So I think VR and AR will be just another market. More people are coming into gaming and they want other ways to play.
Yeah, definitely. We're trying to see into the future here at 4C. And what's your opinion on the conference so far?
It's really nice. It's actually well organized. I'm surprised that organizers can manage all this herd of cats, like speakers and the guests and everyone, so it's going quite well. I haven't seen a lot of talks just yet, but I looked at the talk list. It seems pretty interesting. There's definitely some knowledge which I'll be able to take out of this, and I'm looking forward to that.
Any particular speech you're maybe looking forward to?
To be frank, I'm so freaking out about my own talk that I haven't figured out this specific one I want to see. But I made like a small list. I circled in our brochure, so I'll be looking into what I would really want to see.
If you heard your own talk from the audience, what question would you like to ask yourself?
Whoa, that's a difficult question. I'm not really sure. I'm kind of hoping that I'm giving all the information that I'm supposed to give. So I hope there won't be that many things unclear that will require more questions. I'll be talking a lot about component-based architecture, and maybe that would be useful to elaborate on that. Why Gorilla started with component-based architectures, why everybody's doing it pretty much. Maybe something like this.
Well, hopefully you find the needed answers, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Hi, we're here with one of our speakers. Hello, please introduce yourself.
Hello everyone, I'm Alex Babcock, Head of Global Special Projects at Wargaming.
So Alex, tell us, what have you got to show us?
Well, today and these days at 4C, like the world's best game designers, game developers are sharing their experience with everyone here at 4C. And Wargaming also introduces our best practices here, and today we show to all the attendees the new augmented reality experience that Wargaming has recently built. So basically we've taken the Sturmtiger from World of Tanks to real life, so that more people around the world can experience it, can interact with it, and that's basically what happens behind our backs. So those guys with HoloLens and with the Google Tango device are seeing the future, because they see the Sturmtiger here in the at the conference, but all people around them who don't take the devices, they basically can't see that, but those guys are already seeing future.
Sounds amazing, but how does it work?
Technically, it's a Unity-based application, but available on the Microsoft HoloLens and on Google Tango device. But from the storytelling standpoint, it's part of Wargaming approach towards preserving history, so that we take the model from World of Tanks, which is really unique in real world, so only 2 Sturmtigers left in our world. But with help of augmented reality, we bring it to as many people as possible, so that they can explore this masterpiece of engineering.
So basically we can relive history with this device, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. So this experience is already available at the Tank Museum in Bovington, as well as in the Museum of History of Great Patriotic War in Minsk. And we will bring it even closer to other locations as well.
Pretty cool. Can we see how it works?
Yeah, definitely. So we can now pick up the Microsoft HoloLens and see what's inside, as well as maybe show to the watchers some screenshot from the tablet, where you can also experience the augmented reality.
I'm standing near the Sturmtiger, a tank that has been recreated in augmented reality. It's so near I can almost touch it, except I can't because it isn't there. But I can clearly see it, I can see into every little detail of it. And there's actually a guide telling me about the story, the history of this great vehicle. I hope you can see it on the screens. This is truly amazing technology. This is the future of museums and probably a lot more. This is amazing.